For decades, Europe was often seen as this beacon of peace, right? A continent where big wars felt like, like ancient history. But what if that whole picture is changing? Like really changing right now?
That's exactly what we're diving into today. We've got a stack of sources, top European and U.S. media, analytical reports, and they all point to something pretty profound.
Which is?
The militarization of Europe. I mean, explicit preparation for a potential era of war. We need to unpack what this really means and maybe more importantly, why now.
Okay, let's unpack it. The numbers. That feels like the place to start.
Yeah.
What are these sources actually saying about military spending? Is it really surging?
Oh, it's surging, all right. The figures are pretty striking. And NATO, for example, has set this new benchmark for 2025.
Right.
They're pushing members towards 5% of GDP on defense. Now, 5%. That used to sound almost, unthinkable for many.
Yeah, definitely excessive maybe.
Exactly. But now it's becoming a realistic goal. You see Germany upping its budget year on year. The Netherlands is aiming for 3.5%. The UK's announced billions, even building new arms factories.
Wow, new factories. So it's not just buying more kit, it's about building capacity too.
Precisely. And that links into the EU level. It sounds like the European Union itself is sort of fundamentally rethinking its whole military-industrial system.
Okay, how so? What does that look like on the ground?
Well, the analyses point towards a really deep systemic change. They've approved this huge fund, the SAFE fund. It's about $150 billion.
$150 billion. Wow.
Yeah. And it's designed for joint procurement, big investments in European defense tech. The idea is to seriously boost production, make sure they have access to equipment. There are even these mega loan programs.
Making the EU a direct player in rearmament.
Essentially, yes. It's all driving towards this idea of greater strategic autonomy for Europe.
Okay. Beyond the big picture EU stuff, the sources must be highlighting specific countries making big moves. Germany, for instance. The Bundeswehr seems to be stepping up its external role quite significantly.
Absolutely. It's quite historic, actually. For the first time since World War II, Germany's getting ready to deploy a permanent combat brigade. We're talking up to 5,000 troops. Heavy armor in Lithuania.
Permanent. With permanent bases and everything.
Exactly. Permanent infrastructure.
Yeah.
They're also pouring money into modernizing air control, focusing on anti-drone tech.
Yeah.
It's a major shift.
And how does that stack up against, say, the UK or France?
Yeah.
Are they on similar paths or focusing differently?
Similar levels of seriousness, maybe different focuses. The UK's deep into a major defense review. Billions going into modernizing the army, new tech, strengthening their own defense industry, those 6 new factories you mentioned.
Right.
And the Royal Navy is looking for 12 new attack submarines. That's a big capability boost.
12, okay. And France?
France is really pushing its strategic autonomy agenda, the headline item. A decision to build a whole new aircraft carrier.
An aircraft carrier. That's always a massive statement.
It absolutely is. A symbol of national power, national identity even. And they're also doing things like integrating those tiny Black Hornet nanodrones into their forces with, specialized training and everything.
Okay, this is all fascinating in terms of military kit and deployments, but it makes you wonder, what about the civilian side? Is society being brought into this shift towards defense?
That's a really crucial point, and yes, the sources indicate it is. Several countries are dusting off old debates about compulsory military service.
Really? Conscription potentially coming back?
The discussion is definitely back on the table. Germany's even looking at including women in potential future models. And the role of reservists is expanding hugely. More exercises, state programs. The goal seems to be building this broad societal readiness for a crisis.
So security isn't just for soldiers anymore?
Not at all. It's framed as a collective responsibility now.
And underpinning so much of this, obviously, is Ukraine. How has that war changed the game for Western military aid? It feels like there's been a fundamental shift there, too.
Profound is the word, the big change. Western nations are removing range limits on weapons given to Kyiv.
Meaning Ukraine can strike inside Russia?
Essentially, yes. Acknowledging Ukraine's right to hit legitimate military targets on Russian territory. And look at the industrial links. Germany and Ukraine have a $5 billion joint production deal. French companies are setting up drone factories in Ukraine.
Wow. So connecting the dots, the sources describe Ukraine as Europe's temporal trench. That sounds bleak, but strategically, what does it imply?
It's a stark concept, like you say. The idea is, while Ukraine fights and resists on its own land, it buys time for the rest of Europe.
Buys time.
Crucial time. Time to rearm, to reorganize their militaries, to fundamentally reset their security posture. Ukraine's fight lessens the immediate pressure on NATO's eastern flank, you see. And lifting those weapon range limits, that's not just tactics.
It's strategy.
Exactly. It signals a potential shift away from purely classical deterrence towards a logic of, well, maybe preemptive force if needed down the line, preparing for that possibility.
So wrapping this all up, what's the big takeaway here? The sources seem pretty clear. This isn't just a temporary spending bump. Europe's militarization looks systemic, targeted.
Yeah.
A response to something they see as very real.
It definitely underscores a perhaps uncomfortable truth about peace, doesn't it?
Which is?
That peace isn't just, a wish or a nice idea. It's only really stable when it's backed up by readiness, by organization, and by actual strength. This old Europe that thought it was past major wars, it's now transforming its militaries, its industries.
Not because they want war.
Absolutely not because they want it, but because they feel they must be prepared for the worst case.
So for you listening, this deep dive really prompts a core question, I think. In a world where force, deterrence, where these tools are becoming central again, what does it actually mean to be prepared? Whether you're a nation, a community, or even just thinking about it individually.
Right. And it's not necessarily about, showing off force all the time. Sometimes it's just about having it. The existence of that credible deterrent potential often means you don't actually need to use it.
Preparedness enables dialogue from strength.
Precisely. Preparedness in this new European reality doesn't shut down dialogue. It aims to ensure dialogue can happen from a position of security, making peace not just a hope, but hopefully a sustainable reality.